So the 2025 Six Nations is here, the best annual rugby competition in the world, and it's back. Welcome back to the channel. It's Monday, it gets underway on Friday with France hosting Wales, the first round of fixtures coming up this weekend. So this is my preview. Have your say in the comment section whether it is about your nation or any other thing that I touch upon. Let me know. I'm going to run through it team by team and talk about it from my point of view. What are the big question marks? What are the big narratives for each nation? And give some of my predictions as well for who's going to win it and who's going to get the wooden spoon. But welcome back. It's so good, isn't it? Like, it delivers every single year. It's all a bit grey and miserable up here in the Northern Hemisphere in January, February time. And then we just get this absolute treat of a competition, and there's narratives everywhere. We get great games, the rivalries, the history. It is absolutely blockbuster. So I'm going to start off with Ireland. I'm going to run through it based upon last year's table. So Ireland first, then France, England, Scotland, Italy, then Wales. And let's start with Ireland. I mean, they are going for a historic three-peat. Never been done before. Can they do it? It's interesting with Ireland this year, I think, in that there is an element of there being question marks around them. Off the back of the autumn, they lost at home for the first time in a while. Yes, it was to the All Blacks, who played really, really well. And I suppose one of my big questions for Ireland is, was the autumn a bit of a blip, or was it signs of regression and a team that, from their own admittedly incredibly high standards, have just tailed off slightly? And does that therefore open the door for other nations to jump in front of them or cause them a few headaches? That's one of the big things for me. I actually think that this Ireland team, overall, I think it arguably looks stronger than it was in the autumn. The big news actually overnight is that Tadhg Furlong has been ruled out of the opening game. That's a big, big loss. But you've got the return of Dan Sheehan, who scored a couple of times for Leinster at the weekend. James Lowe returned for Leinster as well. So I still think this is such a strong squad. It's such a settled squad. I think they're all on the same page in that they know the game plan particularly well. I still think they'll be one of the best teams in the Six Nations. The question is, are they going to be the best team? And are they going to be able to win 3 in a row, which would be quite an incredible achievement, really. And I suppose underpinning all of that, really, is the question, what impact does the absence of Andy Farrell have on this team? Now, as the Lions head coach, he isn't there week in, week out, day in, day out. I'm not quite certain on how involved he's still going to be. Like, is he still picking the team? I presume not, but I'm not too sure. So what does it look like without Farrell there? And maybe it's a good opportunity. Simon Easterby who's obviously part of the coaching ticket already, is kind of the man who's fronting it all up, but you've still got a coaching group there that have been together, that know these players. Maybe there'll be very little impact, or has Farrell been just so important that we are going to see a real impact there? And I mentioned Tadhg Furlong being ruled out. If I'm looking at this Ireland team and talking about possible concerns, it has to be that front row, as it was really in the autumn, because Porter, I mean, realistically, you want Porter to be playing 70 minutes plus, which he's done brilliantly, by the way, when it has been asked of him. But the drop-off to the next choice on that side of the scrum, I think, is a concern. Then with Tadhg Furlong's absence, all right, he was absent in the autumn as well because he had an injury. Finlay Bealham will therefore start. But I think you're just looking at that front row and you're just wondering if they get another injury, or if they're in a match where actually Bealham and Porter aren't going as well as they would hope, what does it look like for the players coming in on that particular area of the game? And then the attacking side is the other part of it. It didn't look quite as slick in the autumn. So what does it look at now? I think James Lowe returning is massive. He's crucial for them, in particular in terms of their kicking game. But I suppose with all of this and everything I'm saying about Ireland, I still think they're a brilliant team. I still think they could win the Six Nations. I just think there are more question marks around them than perhaps we've had previously. So what do they look like? Maybe they will shut up all the doubters in the first couple of weeks, put England away, go away to Scotland and put in a great performance there. And then you're looking at that home game against France, the second to last game, the penultimate game, and that could be where it comes down to it. That could be an unbelievable match again, by the way. So what do you think of Ireland? Yeah, I don't know. I'm like this with them. I'm not quite sure. Let's speak about France, though. This is my big hot take actually on France. I think the last 4 or 5 years, including this year, maybe next year as well, but this period generally, we will look back on as being the Ireland and French period, the Farrell against Galtier. The two best teams in the Northern Hemisphere, two incredibly good teams. Do France need more silverware to show for it? Because Ireland, for example, as I say, they are about to try and win a third Six Nations in a row. They have gone to New Zealand and won a test series there. They have drawn a test series against the Springboks, the world champion Springboks, arguably one of the best teams we've ever seen. Like, there are a lot of really notable moments for this Ireland team. Whereas you compare that with the French team that we think of as it being Ireland and France and this era, they've got the one Grand Slam. Outside of that, they've finished runners-up in 4 of the last 5 Six Nations. I think this French team, for how good they are and for the way in which we think about them, need another Six Nations title to show for it. And for me, France would be my favourites for the tournament. Partly because of the question marks that are surrounding Ireland, but mainly, really, because of how good this French team is. Underpinned by Toulouse and Bordeaux, who are going great guns in the top 14, along with Leinster, have been 2 of the 3, arguably the 2 best teams in the Champions Cup. They have the power and physicality in their pack combined with, I think, more X-factor players in their backline than any other team in the competition. And I think overall, off the back of just speaking about Ireland and some of the slight questions that I think are fair to ask of this Ireland setup, I think France have the least question marks around them. And I think they look the most dangerous. I suppose the only thing you would say is they've got England away and Ireland away. Now, all right, England away, last time France went to Twickenham, they beat them by a record score. They put 50 points on them. They absolutely tore them apart. I still think England have the potential to be a tough team at home, but they have been hit and miss. So I'll give you that one. Ireland away, though. And over the last couple of Six Nations, it has come down to who wins that game between Ireland and France. It could still be the same again, in which case, does the fact it's in Dublin play into Ireland's hands a little bit here? That would be my big question. But I think overall, looking at this French team, they would be my favourites. Do you agree with me, or would you have it as Ireland? Let's move on to England. My sigh says it all, really. Where do we start with England? A team that midway through 2024 you think were turning a corner, but had an awful autumn. Really tailed off towards the end of the year. They also have 2 incredibly tough fixtures to start. Ireland away, France at home. It's absolutely possible they lose those 2 games, which puts a whole narrative on their competition of, we're questioning Steve Borthwick again. Should he still be in the job? Then they'll be hosting Scotland at Twickenham in the 3rd game. Scotland, who have won the Calcutta Cup 4 times in a row, which is ridiculous when you think of most of the history, certainly over the last couple of decades of that rivalry. Scotland have absolutely flipped it on its head. But having said all that, it's still an England team that I think you look at the players they have there, you feel they should be better than they were performing at the end of last year. You even look at them going to Dublin, and I think Ireland will win, but you think England could. They're still that sort of team. Do you know what I mean? They're not like a Wales, who at the moment you look at them and you think, where's that win coming from if it's not against Italy? England, you still think, have the players to possibly do something. The problem is all the evidence we have, particularly from the autumn, is they're not going to do it. I think you also look at some of the players they've missed in Jamie George, Faye Woboso, Furbank. Alex Mitchell is touch and go, but if he's out, that's 4 possible starters that they don't have. So how much of an impact does that have on the team? And I suppose in terms of selection, one of the really big questions is, do they continue with Marcus Smith at fly half? I personally would, but there'll be a lot of people who say it should be Finn Smith, or quite what they do there. So I guess this is an England team with so many question marks over them. I think their Six Nations will be dictated by whether they can get a win in the first 2 games. If they can beat either Ireland or France, I think they go into the Scotland game with some sort of momentum, a big win against a top nation, and then you'd look at Scotland at home, Italy at home, Wales away. and say, well, maybe they could, end up with 4 wins here, which would constitute a successful Six Nations. If they lose both those games, the whole narrative and view on that Scotland game is probably very different, depending on what Scotland have done. So yeah, I really don't know with England. I really hope they win one of those first 2 games. Have we seen the evidence at the back end of last year to suggest that will happen? I'm not sure. And is enough going to have changed between the end of the autumn and where we are now, the start of the Six Nations? I'm not sure. Let's get on to Scotland. 2 questions for Scotland fans. How big is the loss of Sione Tuipulotu? The question for Scotland over the last couple of Six Nations, and I think it is the same again here, has been, can you get to the final weekend and have a chance of winning it? And for all the great stuff that this team and Gregor Townsend has done, they've never been able to do that. And I think they'd have been in a great position to possibly be there this time around. But how big is the loss of Sione Tuipulotu, who a lot of people would have him nailed on as their starter in the 12 jersey for the Lions? I've seen Sam Warburton in the Times has written about that. That is a big loss for Scotland. I thought Gregor Townsend was actually really interesting, I think at their squad announcement, and I think it was on the BBC Scotland podcast, where I saw they asked him about, can they win it, essentially, the same thing they get asked all the time. And Townsend, I thought, gave a great answer in that he said, look, we know it's really difficult, but you also appreciate that your window, your opportunity to win the Six Nations with this group of players and the talent they have and the experience they've built and the depth they've built and all those sort of things, that window won't last forever, which I thought was quite a candid answer. Most of the time you would have a head coach just kind of batting it away, really. And I don't think it's necessarily now or never, but we're not far away from it from Scotland. Like, they have to get themselves in a position to win it, I think. They've done such good stuff. But are they going to be able to, in particular, with the loss of Sione Tuipulotu? The reasons you'd say that they could is it's a Glasgow team that have gone and won the URC. On the road as well, difficult fashion, backs up against the wall. They've got players that are winners in that squad. I think their physicality has improved. Massive question for this Scotland team over the last few years, which stemmed, I suppose it was around before the World Cup, but certainly stemmed off the back of the World Cup where they couldn't compete physically with the Springboks. They struggled against Ireland. I think they are better physically as well. It's a settled team. It's a team that has been around. They've had some really notable wins over the years, away against England at Twickenham, away in Paris against France. Ireland has still been an issue for them, admittedly. So you look at that Ireland game at home, their second game in the competition. I think that's a massive hurdle for them, a massive challenge for them. But can they get there? I'm just not sure. I'm not sure on Scotland. I'd love it. I would absolutely love it. They've got France away on the final weekend. If that came down to like a shootout for the Six Nations, how good would that be? But with Ireland at home, England away, I think they'll beat Italy and Wales. Those are the 2 games with Scotland of can they win? Or can they at least win one of the 2 and be in with a chance of winning it on the final weekend? Let's finish it off with Wales and Italy. Italy first. It's funny with the Italians, isn't it? They had a great Six Nations last year. They won 2 games and drew one of them, but still finished 5th because of how the table worked out. I guess my thought on them is, can they kick on? They weren't great in the autumn. They actually played pretty well against the All Blacks in defeat, but they got smashed by Argentina. I think they have more quality in that team, particularly in the back line, than they have probably previously. Brex and Menoncello in the centres were outstanding last year. They've got good options in their back 3 as well. I'd love it if Italy are able to kick on. You look at that game against Wales on the second weekend, though, Italy at home to Wales, that is going to be massive. Massive for both teams. In fact, I'll get onto that in a second when I talk about Wales, but just final thing I wanted to mention on Italy is the importance of Benetton's progress, which has been something that has been kind of bubbling along for a few years. But they've looked really good, I think, Benetton, from what I've seen of them in the Champions Cup. How much of a benefit is that? In a similar kind of argument to what I was making with the Glasgow team and Scotland, how beneficial is that to the Italians of how Benetton are going? But as I mentioned, that game against Wales for Italy at home, Wales travelling to Rome on the second weekend. I mean, it probably, certainly from a Welsh point of view, I think it comes down to that. Italy, as they showed last year against Scotland, against France, are maybe more capable of surprising some of the other nations. Whereas Wales, I'm just not sure where that win is coming from. Possibly England at home on the final weekend. It's generally closer than you expect to a Wales-England game, in particular when it's in Cardiff. So I wouldn't write them off entirely there, but I still think that second game for Wales is so important. And is Warren Gatland's job on the line here, ultimately? If they don't win a game this Six Nations, it's 17 defeats in a row, and you do feel that that is maybe a run of form that Gatland isn't able to come back from. I actually think Wales are going to win, even though at the moment it's hard to see where it's coming from. I just feel like off the back of last year, they've got some experience returning. Josh Adams, Liam Williams, Talupe Faletau. There are all sorts of issues in the rest of the team and a lack of experience and what's going to happen at fly half and in their centres. Their back row is good. They're a team that don't know how to win. Like, there are so many reasons you could say for why Wales will get the wooden spoon again and won't win a game. My gut instinct is they will pick up a result somewhere, either against Italy away or actually England at home. Could be totally wrong there. That is my general feel on it. And I actually still think Italy, even if they do lose to Wales, as I say, are capable of maybe shocking someone elsewhere. What do you think? So who's going to win? I'm saying France. I think they're the best team in the competition. I think they have the least question marks around them. I guess the only thing is that they have to go to Dublin. And who's going to get the wooden spoon? I'm actually going to go Italy. Against prevailing sentiment, perhaps. But I'm going to say that Wales actually... I don't think Wales will be great, but I think they might get a result here or there. So I'm going to say Italy for the wooden spoon. Can't wait for it. Cannot wait for it. I'm going to try and do more and more videos. I know I have been slacking on the channel, I'll be honest with you. Combination of work and motivation and keeping it going has been a bit of a challenge. I really want to keep it going. Now that it's Six Nations, I'll try and do as many videos as possible. Hopefully every day. Sure, there'll be days that slip off, but that is the intention. So thank you for watching and clicking on the video. Like the video as well, comment down below, and also make sure you are subscribed to the channel. See you in the next one.